Hello there, in this video I'm going to go over the Note tab in Absynth, which will allow you to scale certain parameters across each of the notes on your MIDI keyboard. Before we get into it though, here's what our current patch sounds like, playing a range of notes. So up here we have a single square wave oscillator going into a low pass filter, and the second oscillator B is a triangle wave with a frequency modulation, so FM oscillator. The note page itself can be found within the Perform window, which is up here in the top left, and the Note tab in the middle. Traditionally, on most synthesizers, you might know of this feature by the name of key scaling or key tracking. But here we have quite a nonlinear approach to mapping the parameter values, allowing for a great variation across keys. We can individually access 127 MIDI notes, all the way from -C2 up to G8. The parameters available are the most often associated with key scaling, as they tend to affect the timbre brightness as the note pitch increases or decreases. We can use this to give a more natural timbre variation, as well as more complex creative choices. Per oscillator, we can assign amplification, FM index or oscillator balance, filter frequency, and master filter frequency depth. Scaling the values can be achieved in a few ways. Most noticeably, we can use our mouse cursor to draw curves. Take note that it is quite easy to cover a range of keys. With our mouse over the graph, in the above row we can see the note value, and to the right we can see the current scale value. To make changes, we simply click and drag on the graph. These alterations do not affect the notes playing in real time, so we would have to trigger them after we make the changes. You can also select a note securely by clicking on the indicated note value first up here and then dragging on the scaler. A more direct way is to use your hardware MIDI keyboard to select and monitor the notes, and your mouse for adjustments. This is a good way to establish start and end points for reference. So toggle the keyboard button here to start using your controller for selections. So I'll just press C1 and then scale that to 85, and then I'll select a few octaves higher. And then I'll drag that portion out just for fun, and that portion of 1, 2, 3 octaves does not have a oscillator A. If I turn oscillator B off, then we only have oscillator A, but between this section we don't have any volume because it's scaled to 0. So another example would be to use the FM index on number 2 or oscillator B. So I'll put this back. I'll show you a way to create a notch curve so that the FM index applies to a mid-range of keys and not so much lower notes or very high notes. So we'll start by finding a bass note. Now let's say anywhere below C2 I don't want that modulation there, so we'll scale it down, except we'll scale it down from C3, something like that, because we want the timbre to be softer. And similarly, I'll do the same for the higher notes. so it's easier to see, I'll just play the notes with the built-in keyboard here. Now onto the oscillator A. So I'm just testing the note and the scale together. And you'll hear that I can actually filter out the square wave when I hit 0. So I'll roll the filter down to around 10% on the lowest notes. You'll find this note scaler most useful for giving natural dynamic to those sounds that are otherwise too sterile and synthetic. This is yet another way to introduce further variations into your sound patch.